is still in the past, still stuck in time somewhere else, replaying this event over and over and over again because it hasn't got the update that we've moved on. The unconscious and the conscious, like, they have different timelines. The conscious mind is on a linear timeline, you know, and we can see linearly how things change and evolve, and oh, I'm in a new place, I'm really in a new place. But the unconscious isn't necessarily updated in the same way. We have to like remind our unconscious because it's in the non-linear timeline. It can be in the past, replaying itself on a tape, on a time loop. It can be in 1994. It can be still, we can still be part of ourselves can still be living in our parents' house when we were 6 years old. And we're still getting informed from that place. It's like still giving us information from that place, and part of ourselves that's unconscious like still thinks we're there.
The title of this stream is An Elephant Searching for Mud. I was an elephant, and I had to go travel to collect wet mud to eat. In the background of the dream, there was almost like an animal discovery channel, describing what I was doing, like a man's voice over it. When I found the wet mud, I was mopping it up with a mop, and I kept mopping and mopping, trying to find more wet mud under this tree. Then suddenly, there were loads of other elephants, and they were all sitting in a circle. They said something about a man coming to capture us for taking the mud. And then some elephant or person who was guiding me felt like a father figure, told me to get the mud. And so I did, and I put it in a really small egg-shaped container and hid it under a bench. I felt under pressure and scared. Then the men came and searched the area. They took us away, and very randomly, the whole scene changed. I don't know whether I entered into another dream, but it felt like they were connected. I was then at a netball court, and I was human again. I was guiding these people playing netball, and then they all started throwing the netballs back at me to clear up. Then I was kicking the balls back towards the edge of the court. And then this man came up to me holding a glass pot, and he started mixing all these powders, and I asked him what he was doing. He said he was making soup. And then I woke up.
Great. What was the feeling upon waking of this dream?
I felt confused and slightly scared.
Was there an intention for dreaming?
I didn't make an intention before.
Could any part of this dream happen in your waking future?
It is possible that I could be helping people with playing netball because I've been thinking about getting back into the sport recently. But the rest of the dream, where I was an elephant, does not relate to a possible waking future.
What is the background context of this dream and how it relates to your waking life now?
I did not recognize anyone in the dream. The netball court I was in was the netball court I used to play in secondary school. I am now 22 and at university.
What do you want to know about this dream?
I want to know more about the first part of the dream. Why I was an elephant, what was the purpose of me collecting mud, and who were the men coming to capture us?
Perfect. So Cher, if this were your dream, what do you think?
Welcome back to Messages from the Deep, a podcast for dreams. I am your host, Cher Kirti, and your favorite co-host, Michaela Costello from Dream Party Hotel, rejoins me for our third episode. And in this dream, we explore symbols such as mud, elephant, and seeking nourishment at the origin, whether that is the core essence of our soul, the beginning of time, or just the beginning of this lifetime. We discover different roles, different parts of our soul, as well as the practice of recapturing those parts of the soul, how to piece them back together, where they go, where we find them. And as well, we share some of our personal experiences with honoring the dream and how we can build that bridge from our dreams to this reality. So thank you for joining us again. And if you would like to have your dream featured on our next episode, please submit at sharekirti.com/submityourdream. The link will also be in the description wherever you're listening or watching this. And if you don't want it featured, you can let us know. You can just use it as a journal prompt. It's a great tool. That's an option as well. Feel free to share, and I hope you enjoy.
If this was my dream, I mean, there's so many parts. I really had to pull this one apart. But
Same.
the first thing is the wet mud. I was thinking of the two elements, earth and water, coming together to make mud. And it's heavy and slow, like an elephant is. Elephant is also big, heavy, and slow. And elephants are also often trained in the circus because even though they're really big creatures and they could trample people, they also have a docile spirit, I feel, and they're easily, like, they definitely have a history of being abused. And so that's another layer of this, like, there's this feminine essence of slow earth and water, slowness, emotions, this weight. And the fact that she was mopping it up, I feel like there's this like messy contents I'm trying to gather, and I'm trying to keep it together, but it's just a mess. And I'm feeling frightened. And there's a man's voice. So I feel like there's a man's voice, like, in my subconscious telling me what to do, driving me towards gathering this mud. And I'm trying to keep it together. I'm running scared. And there's clearly a group of people around me that's trying to help, or maybe are in a similar situation, but I still feel that I'm a part of something. And yet in this process of gathering mud, I feel very alone. I feel, I sense like panic, and like almost like when you make a mess and you're like, I need to gather this right now. Like, oh my God, like in trouble. And of course that is expressed in the dream where there's a group of people coming to capture me and other people, and I'm being warned. So there's this rush and like essence. And then putting all the mud in the egg, I feel like it's so symbolic too, because the egg is fragile, and putting the contents in there, it feels like my wet, messy, dense emotional contents in this fragile thing that I'm hiding, and I have to put it away. So it feels like I'm protecting something very fragile. I don't know exactly what to do, but it seems like I'm getting some help. So I'm not sure, but I do feel like there's some part of me that's feeling at the same time pressured, and yet I know I have support, but I feel kind of weak and alone at the same time. Yeah.
Interesting. I like that. I like what you said about like packing all these messy things into a fragile container. And if it were my dream, I would think that the first thing that came to mind was that if it were my dream, it would be happening, all of that and everything that's happening in the elephant scene is happening in my unconscious. I said that, and then maybe with like an unconscious memory. So something that's happening right now, or like a memory of something that is now unconscious to me that maybe happened when I was a child or a baby or something like that. And I say unconscious because in this part of the dream, I am an elephant, which is like in the animal kingdom, the unconscious kingdom. and then there's like this conflict between elephant versus man. So like unconscious versus conscious, where then the like animal kingdom is my unconscious and the man is my conscious. So like the conscious aspects of myself in conflict with unconscious aspects of myself, maybe in the form of a memory or maybe not. I started out thinking about this dream in terms of, again, like bringing up the themes of literal versus symbolic content. It would seem like the first thing we would jump to in the first part of the dream is symbolism, because I'm an animal, and obviously that's not literally possible, but is it? Like in some cases it is. The first thing it reminded me of is that like the first theme to me is expanding consciousness to take on the forms of other creatures. So an ability, like perhaps the overlying theme of this dream, at least the first one, is like my expansion of consciousness to assume other forms, which is, I mean, which is not also not symbolic. It might be now, but in the archaic world it was very much a literal sport of shamans and stuff like that, to in ritual settings, for medicinal purposes, for storytelling purposes, for ritual purposes, to shapeshift and assume the forms of other creatures to expand consciousness in order to have different skills and attributes and access to different things in different worlds. So that was the first thing that came to mind. I'm like, oh, I was an elephant. I mean, to me that's pretty unusual. I don't hear that a lot. I don't know that I've had a dream where I was an animal. I've had dreams where I was other people, or from different perspectives, but I don't know if I've ever had a dream being in the body of an animal. So that's pretty unique, actually. So I think that's really interesting. The overall theme to me is, yeah, this expansion of consciousness. And then there's especially because elephants are, they're known for being really intelligent and being social and having good memory and all these like attributes of higher consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think that like in the expansion, it's also like a need to go back to the beginning for something, for some resource, for some nourishment. Whenever I think of mud, the first thing I think of is an origin story from, I believe, Aborigine in New Zealand, but I think there's also an Indigenous American story that's very similar, wherein life started out of mud, and specifically this like kind of eel-like creature slashing around in mud. So whenever I think of mud, I just think of like the origins of life. And elephants don't eat mud, but they can intake it for like mineral content, like extra nourishment. So I was like, in my dream, I'm like searching. I've expanded my consciousness, by the way, but I'm also searching for like to almost in order to go back, and I'm like searching for this nourishment. Maybe this is a unconscious memory. Maybe it's a new experience that's happening now, but like I'm like searching for this resource that's coveted by both my unconscious and my conscious, and is actually being like fought over by my unconscious and they're both like fighting for this resource, and the conscious aspect is like, trying to take the unconscious part away from it and starve it of this nourishment. How the man is coming in and banishing the elephants from taking the mud, but then part of my unconscious has taken it and put it in an egg, which of course is also like symbolizes gestation and birth and new life. So like a life force in this egg, and like being tucked away and hidden and like saved for later.
And something you said with clay and returning to the origin for nourishment makes me think of ancient clay that people use now for like as a superfood and as a healing mask. We put in our baths, we put in our face, now we put it into our smoothies and things like that, and tea. And it's like the more ancient it is, we assume that it's like the more powerful and more nutrient packed it is. And so now you're connecting all of this. It's making me think of the egg too. Like there's something about returning to the beginning or returning to the origin that somehow that there's something nurturing or can provide nutrients to return to that place.
It reminds me of like vital energy, like storing away vital energy for some time later down the road. There's a lot of times where like we have creative energy that we're not able to use at that point in time. Say, for example, hypothetically in childhood, if I have like all this creative energy, but I'm not in an environment where that is encouraged or nourished or even allowed, then I'll have to tuck it away in a safe space for later. And oftentimes we find in dreams that like that's a common theme for most people in their lives. And we find in dreams a lot like portals into places where we've stored or locked away vital energy for our lives that was not able to be, it was not safe to like utilize at some point or another. But when, you know, of course circumstances change and we become adults and more autonomous over our environments, and we see that these resources will come back to us when they're, you know, when it's like safe to release them again or to utilize them again.
Yeah. And shaped from clay too. Thinking of that. This is something that crossed my mind when you're talking about that. Mud is also clay. You're saying something about the origin of creation. You mentioned that earlier. And I recently rewatched Wonder Woman, and her mom, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but her mom keeps telling her the story. And, you know, when people ask her like, oh, where are you from? She always says, I was shaped from clay, and then Zeus brought me to life.
Really?
Made me think of that as
Interesting.
well. Like,
yeah, there you go.
Creating life from clay. And you mentioned that it was the unconscious world too. I realized that the dream changes to where she's human and a woman, and well, herself. And I feel like there's more control and containment in that next scene as she moves into that too. Like the balls, the structure, the fact that she's guiding people, they're almost like looking to her versus her like running away. So it's like, yeah, I noticed that there is that transition, what you're saying with as she's an elephant, that's the unconscious realm, and then she actually transitions more into maybe a present timeline.
Yeah, to me, if it were my dream, I think they would relate. And I think I think they can relate in a pretty clear way, especially if I'm like in the dream, I'm guiding others. I had a clarifying question that I guess won't be clarified but right now, but it was like, because tell me what you thought. In the dream she said that everybody was kicking balls at her, but then she was clearing them off. So is that just protocol, or were they like kicking balls at her?
See, it took me a second to understand that, but I do think that that's like they were clearing off the court.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So that's what it led to me realize. Also, I had to look at what netball was.
Yeah.
I had never heard of netball in my life. And at first I was like, well, it sounds like a court of some kind. So I looked it up, and it looks like it's a mainly women played sport.
I think it's, yeah, I looked this up too. It kind of, I mean, it looks like, I think it's played like in the UK. It's not really an American sport. It looks like some form of basketball.
Yeah, something.
Basketball with a volleyball.
Yeah. And it seems like in a way she's like a captain in this world, because if they're kicking it to her and she's guiding them, she's somewhat of a captain, I feel. So it just feels like the role shifts so much from the dream before, where she was more of in a victim role a bit, or just more scared, and then going into a world where she's way more in control.
Right. So there's like, she's like, so in the background context, she said that she's been thinking this is a netball court from her waking life that she's thinking of returning to as a guide. she's thinking of returning to the sport, and she used to play it in secondary school. Now she's thinking of returning. In the dream, she's a guide. So I would say, yeah, like what you're saying, like a captain or a coach or something like that, which is a leadership role. So if it were my dream, I would connect the two parts of the dream by saying that, like, now that I'm in this phase of my life, I'm in my early 20s and I'm stepping more, at least in terms of like where I was as a teenager and in high school or whatnot, like I'm having the chance to step into roles that are more leadership based, and there could be some vital energy for available for me in those tasks and endeavors that are like stored away really deep down in my unconscious, that I've been saving for later, that at some point I put away, consciously or not, in this like egg to transform, to gestate, to grow, to evolve. And now if it were my dream, like the dream is showing me where I can go and recollect that energy and utilize it in my life and my pursuits currently.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of returning to the origin, everything you're saying now. Like animal, mud, egg, everything seems to be about creation or going back to the beginning.
Yeah,
So
totally.
it's like something that she was returning to discover something, that maybe there's something that is wanting to be discovered or to be hatched, like reopened.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say that. I mean, if it were my dream, I would definitely want to go back into re-enter the first part of this dream, and see what was, see what was in the egg, or do what she would with that dream, revisit it, see who the men are, see what the conflict is, like who's being pursued, why, what's so valuable about this resource, about the mud, why aren't we allowed to have it, etc. Like figure out what's really going on in the dream and the dynamics. Are the men a part of myself? Were they a part of my memory in the past? Were they a part of my childhood that is, a little bit unconscious to me? Are they, these kind of things?
Could they be like authority figures? Like society is very masculine, very, mainly patriarchal. And so we grow up with authority and structure in school with our teachers. There's like law authorities in general, that in a way that there's something, maybe the essence, like the innocence or the emotions that was put away because of needing to follow structures or authority outside of oneself.
Exactly. And a lot of it, yeah, like I said, like this is a theme for everyone. We all have to like kind of dampen down and store for later, or, kind of let go of, either consciously or not, aspects of ourselves that don't fit into the mold of a homogenized society and schooling system, and et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't mean that those things aren't, I mean, they are, but we are built perfectly as unique beings, and whatever doesn't fit into that, it might not be able to be utilized in our early life when we don't really have autonomy over our environments or the institutions we're participating in. But later on, if we free ourselves from those restrictions and limitations, then we can reutilize these things and they'll come back at us, and are, because the body doesn't forget. The body knows everything we've ever like had and left behind or forgotten, but we forget along the way for sure. So dreams are really great. Like they act as portals into almost like the body showing us in a way we can understand, aka through images and like, and a narrative, where we are able to re-access parts of ourselves that we've left behind in the past.
You feel that, you said dreaming as an animal, like it's not very common. Do you feel that in a way the elephant could be a representation of some unique aspect of her?
Sure, of course. To me, I don't, like if it were my dream, I have one dream where elephants were a part of it, but I was not an elephant. I was just like in that part of the world, and I was riding on an elephant, and it was like reading my fortune with its trunk. It was like touching me with its trunk and reading my fortune. That was a cool dream.
That's
But anyways, I would say, yeah, since I don't really have like, other than that, I don't have a personal, like, it's not like I've never contacted an elephant in my common world. I don't really have a ton of like memory or experience. So that's why I would just go then to like what her relationship with elephants is. She could have a personal relationship with that animal for sure. I would go with that. I would definitely do that first. And then if there's no personal relationships, I would go with anything you've ever like read or seen about an elephant, like maybe a memory of a show or TV or like a documentary. And if not that, then I would go just look up the basic symbolism of the elephant. And then, yeah.
Just thinking that. I wanted to look at it really quick to see what it says. Just the first part. Okay, while
Sure.
in Western eyes, the elephant is the picture of overweight clumsiness. The Asian image is very different.
I don't think so, but okay.
That's the first line. Elephants were ridden by kings, and first and foremost by Indra, lord of the heavens. They therefore symbolize the power of kingship. Shiva being titled the elephant in the exercise of his kingly office. Since the effects of settled kingship are peace and prosperity, whoever invokes the power of the elephant is given their heart's desire. In many regions, and particularly in monsoon countries, the gift they desire is rain, which is one of heaven's blessings. There's that water in the heart essence. Yeah, that's cool.
Well, there you go. Also, we're talking about like potential leadership roles and like potentially, reaccessing vital energy in order to step into a leadership role in my life. And there was, that passage just mentioned it's there, have to do with kings and leadership. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And I feel like elephants do hold that power. Like to me, when I think of these elephants like rushing away from these captors, I could see that imagery so clearly of elephants being afraid and fleeing. But at the same time, that if an elephant just decided to, it could turn around and trample everyone.
Yeah, so, seriously.
Choice. Yeah. I feel like it's a choice to like what it can do that. It has so much power if it wishes to.
Totally. Yeah. What did I And then I would also like re-mention the fact that she's if it were my dream, I'm looking for food. Like the mud is food, or is equating to food for me. And when I find the mud, I'm digging or mopping it up to try to find more underneath. So to me, there's this like call for nourishment, for substance, for something that can carry me through and make me stronger, give me strength.
Yeah. Maybe returning to this sport, be a part of that. Like investing in herself almost. Taking the time to do so.
Yeah. And reclaiming vital energy, that's mine.
I'm curious about the soup. I actually didn't think too much on that.
I know that it kind of threw me for a loop the first time I read it. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. But that happens all the time in dreams. It's such a typical dream thing. Like have kind of a narrative that's connected, and then one thing that's just like, and then this random thing that like seemingly makes no sense. It's such a funny, like, it's classic. But it does actually make sense to me once I gave it some consideration.
I mean, it's usually right before you wake up because it's so weird.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's one little thing that happened to me last night in my dream. I had like this whole narrative, and I was like, and then there was also something about seals, like like the animal, and I'm like, but it's just throw it on in there, almost like soup. Anyways, so in the dream, let's read this part of the dream again. So she's at the netball courts. They're clearing out clearing away balls from the courts. And then a man comes up to me holding a glass pot, and he started mixing in powders, and I asked him what he was doing, and he said he was making soup.
Dried mud is like a powder.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There you go.
It's almost like he's giving her, it's like a recipe. It's an ingredient.
Uh-huh.
And mixing it with water too. This makes me think of mud again, earth and water. So I would think I'm maybe receiving something, or even like accessing some part of myself that's coming back to life. They're telling me it's time. I can utilize this egg I've stored maybe a
Yeah.
while ago.
Yeah, I had that. If it were my dream, I mean, there's a guide in the first part of the dream and there's a guide in the second part of the dream. The guide in the first part of the dream is, again, unconscious, like me, myself, you know, as an elephant. And the guide in the second part of the dream is conscious, like myself as me and my body doing something that's common in my life, playing netball. And then there's a man. So that's also in my conscious like aspect. And to me, the soup is like kind of a perfect symbol for nourishment, like that nourishment, like seeking the mud as nourishment or vital energy, the egg as life and vital energy, you know, and then soup, which is very commonly associated with being very nourishing, connected to childhood and mothering and substance and medicine and all of these things. And it also reminded me of the fact that the dream, to me, I think can be seen pretty clearly as unconscious and conscious aspects of the same thing coming together, which you could also say is kind of metaphorical when we're dealing with soup, of blending things, just putting things together, you know, and harmonizing and balancing out different aspects to create this one whole thing that's harmonious and balanced and nourishing, can be utilized, you know, can be digested, can be taken in.
Do you feel like when these things, because you've spoken about this in the past, where when we have experiential dreams, that in a way we are experiencing it, we are having that emotional integration of the experience. So would you take a dream like this saying that there could be something, it's even restoring something unconsciously, like that it could just, in a way, it's like putting a piece back in place, that we wake up and suddenly it's there, it's like reawakened because the unconscious kind of returned a piece of that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It is like a restoration of something that was either locked away, hidden away, or put somewhere else, you know, even outside of our energy field, that then can be retrieved and received. Going all the way back to the beginning of the dream and talking about shamanism and shapeshifting as a totally real and literal phenomenon. I mean, this was the point of doing that in general. The point of being able to shapeshift into different forms, different animals, was for primarily the purpose of not only giving offerings to the higher heavens, but also to capture, kidnap parts of the soul and put them back into the energy field of a person, a sick person. With the overall concept of soul loss is that the soul is a free agent, so to speak, and can sequester off in percentages and in parts and pieces when it's unhappy with its environment or its circumstances in our waking world. So for example, if we're a highly creative child that is being beaten into homogenization, part of the soul that is like the creative aspect of myself might literally go live somewhere else and go away from our energy field. And when that happens, part of our field gets lost. It's almost like a hole. There's like a gaping hole in our energy field. And when that happens, then we're vulnerable to foreign invasion of energy, which can make us physically and or mentally sick. So under like the archaic understanding of sickness, part of the soul is gone and needs to be retrieved. So a sick person would come to a shaman, and the shaman would go into an ecstatic trance in a ritual and go into the dreaming, into the underworlds, into the upper worlds or parallel worlds or what have you, and go and find the lost part of the soul that is missing, that is living somewhere else, and kidnap it back and bring it back to the, the primary body that it left. And in doing so, securing the energy field of that person and making them well.
When you're describing the soul being lost when we move or like leave our hometown, is that in a way like just leaving your environment in general can cause that? Is what you're saying?
I meant like the soul will live somewhere else in time, like in another layer of reality, not physically on this earth, somewhere else. Although that could happen. I'm not sure if I explained that clearly enough.
I'm curious, I guess, because this topic in general is piquing my interest, and I feel like people would love to hear more about the aspects of soul retrieval and soul loss.
Sure.
So I was just curious because you're saying something about leaving a part of ourselves behind.
Mm-hmm.
That can happen when we leave environments like our home environment where we grew up. And
Sure.
I know psychologically they say leaving environments also helps you rewire and create new habits because you kind of like framed your way of operating in your environment. So in this respect, you're saying that can also mean a piece of us is left behind as well.
Yeah.
Is that something that happens often, or is it more of an emotional aspect of like, okay, I'm leaving a part of myself behind? And is that always bad? Don't we want to leave parts of ourselves behind? Or is there like a healthy way to do that where we're not losing pieces of ourselves?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between vital energy and outdated versions of the self. If we're shedding a skin and releasing limiting beliefs and old versions of the self that don't serve us anymore, obviously that's like a positive change and transformation. That's like a snake shedding its skin, it's part of being able to revitalize the body. And then soul loss is a different thing. Soul loss is when part of our vital energy is unable to be expressed, utilized, and honored in our lives, and it's part of like the actual soul.
Gotcha.
I would use soul and vital energy interchangeably to make the concept more accessible to people. Yeah, there's the difference of transformation and leaving behind limiting parts of, limited aspects of the self, and having part of the soul putting away part of the soul because it can't be honored are two different things. So for soul loss, it's more of an aspect of ourselves, an aspect of our vital energy or our soul energy leaves due to it's being unhappy, unsatisfied with current circumstances, and going somewhere else where it can live out its purpose and its character. It's harder to understand since that, like when we're not living in this kind of reality as much anymore. This is like a really archaic way of describing soul loss, but I think it totally, I think it applies. I think it applies to here now. And I think this has happened to everybody, and it happens a lot. I think sometimes I think that dreams, like 70% of dreams are showing us where parts of our vital energy are stuck in time. A classic one is like, you get divorced, and part of your soul within that conflict, like years of conflict or a year of conflict, when you're like just like in a bad environment or in a toxic relationship, part of your soul is like, peace out, I'm out I'm gonna go somewhere else. And then we move on in time consciously, and maybe everything, all of our like external circumstance changes, like, oh, how about I found a new house and I live in a new environment and I get a new job and I'm in a new city, and it seems like all of these things have changed, but Every time I meet a new man, I seem to project my ex-husband onto him, you know? And it's like, well, maybe that's because part of ourselves is away from our conscious energy field, just like is still in the past, still stuck in time somewhere else, replaying this event over and over and over again because it hasn't got the update that we've moved on. The unconscious and the conscious, like, they have different timelines. The conscious mind is on a linear timeline, and we can see linearly how things change and evolve, and oh, I'm in a new place, I'm really in a new place. But the unconscious isn't necessarily updated in the same way. We have to like remind our unconscious because it's in the non-linear timeline. It can be in the past replaying itself on a tape, on a time loop. It can be in 1994. It can be we can still be part of ourselves can still be living in our parents' house when we were 6 years old. And we're still getting informed from that place. It's like still giving us information from that place, and part of ourselves that's unconscious like still thinks we're there, and then applying that information to our lives.
Yeah, it's like
and
dust
then we
on the film.
Yeah, and we see ourselves like replaying these things from our childhood or our past that seemingly have nothing, are completely unrelated, but it's like you see it how we project our past all over our present.
How would you advise in this case using dream work as a tool to resolve some aspect of this projection that people tend to do?
Yeah, well, dreams are portals and you can use them as portals. And to me, what I do is re-enter dreams and I've described it in various ways, and it's not like I'm like certain that I know exactly how all of this works. I don't. This is just like from my own experience and from my own research and studies and interests. But to me, I re-enter dreams and you update the memory field, you update the image, and you update your unconscious and like put it into real time. If like, and like if I having dreams, because this happens in like big trauma in life, but also in just small aspects too, like it doesn't, like this definitely happens if we get like, if we suffer a really bad injury or an accident, or we get divorced, or there's a death, or like something, these really stressful things. Definitely the soul, like we have to do soul retrieval from those times for sure. But it can also happen in really small, little percentages as well, where it's like, oh, there's one point, some like time in high school where I got like super embarrassed, and it's like, it's not like drama in the way people like speak of like really crazy things, but it's like, it's still a glitch in the nervous system that can like then just kind of like stick on repeat over and over and over again. And we have dreams where I'm like, oh, I keep on having this dream where I just like feel embarrassed, or I'm back in high school and this thing is happening, this thing, or I'm with the same people and I keep on having dreams with these same people. Well, those can all be signified time elements, places in time where we have like stuck or gone away and that we're able to retrieve. And so dreams are really good at giving us these things that we can heal and integrate in the right time and in the amount that we can actually integrate. So as opposed to something like drinking ayahuasca or doing something like this that can give you that same sort of information all at once, way too much at once, and it's like, wow, you see all of these aspects of yourself that are split apart in time and that are traumatized and in the dark place and that you aren't living with your full vital energy and all that. But it's like, can you integrate it? That's another question. So dreams will give you all the exact same information, but little by little in doses that you can actually integrate. So tonight I'm going to integrate a tiny part of myself that's split off here, and I'm going to integrate a tiny part of myself, and little by little, you can use dreams. I think that, like sometimes it really just comes with practice. Sometimes there is like a direct thing you can do in the waking world, drawing a picture, writing that poem, that, picking up the colored pencils I was, never able to draw when I was a kid in my parents' home because they didn't like it, whatever. All right, so start doing it now, that's a way to bring it back. That's a way to get it. Or it's going back into the image and rewriting it, like updating the unconscious to let it know, you know, like, oh, I'm not there anymore. Actually, I know part of me thinks that apparently that I'm still in my parents' home and it's 1994, but actually, let me show you. Like, let me show you a way out. In archaic shamanism, the stories are they're really like wild and dramatic, and they're like these sagas where the soul is like in part in this world, and it's being guarded by, you know, a beast or a guardian, or it doesn't want to leave because it's happy there and it doesn't want to go back to the circumstances it left behind. And so again, going into shape shifting, like the shaman will shape shift into different forms of life, different creatures. So like into a bird so it can fly and get a higher view, or into an elephant so it can stomp around on things, you know, like depending on where it's faced, what situations it's faced with, the soul can shapeshift and transform into different aspects in order to kidnap the soul. And it's usually very dramatic and it's like a saga. Get the princess from the castle, you know, and battle the dragon. It's like all of it's like those kind of stories. And they're really fun and interesting. And it's kind of like the same thing, but not, it doesn't have to be so dramatic. The way I was taught to modernize it is to make the soul, like I say, kidnap. A lot of like old stories talk about kidnapping. We don't have to kidnap parts of ourselves back, and that might not work always, you know, but we can. I was taught to, you know, make a deal. If I find parts of myself, parts of my child, you know, 4-year-old self stuck in time or had gone somewhere else and doesn't want to come back because it doesn't know that, you know, we've overcome our circumstances, well, cut it a deal. What are you going to do for that part of yourself that's going to make it want to come back with you now? Are you going to, you know, like I said earlier, are you going to draw a picture every day for a week to let it know that it can express itself? You know, you're going to go get an ice cream, do something for it, honor it. It left because it couldn't be honored. So now we're going to honor that part of ourselves now in our actions in our daily lives in order for to reintegrate its vital energy, and so that its vital energy sticks around.
I love that. There's something like hit there, like do something to honor those parts. I think it is such a huge permission slip for everyone to, have these fun incentives and know that it's also really healing and important to do those things. Totally.
I'll give you an example, a longer form example, even though that was already a mouthful. I had a dream where I was in the auditorium of my elementary school, and there was a confrontation with a lion and mountain lion. And I was like, you know, like in the dream, I was like, oh shit, I hope it doesn't see me. You know, there was like a crowd of people and there was a mountain lion, and it was like kind of stalking, and I was like, you know, whatever. So I went back into that dream to see what was up, because there was an element of vital energy and power in the form of a power animal, and there was an element, a time element, in the environment being a place from my past, my elementary school. So since that's an environment from my past that I don't visit, I can like see that there's a time element involved, right? So there's like vital energy and a time element involved in this dream. So, but I don't, you know, like based on just the dream alone, I can't tell specifically what it is. I re-entered the dream consciously, just using my active imagination. And the first thing that came up was a memory from my waking life, where when I was like 12, I tried out for the school musical. And if you haven't already noticed, I am pretty fucking tone deaf. And I had to like sing a song, and I have this like visceral memory of like singing in front of the like teacher, or whatever teacher was like gonna be the director, and like just watching her face and being like, oh my god, this is so embarrassing. Like it was just like so embarrassing, you know. And I was like, wow, I am never doing that again, you know. And I had this, and I went into this memory, and I was like, okay, this makes sense. This is like a part, you know, like a small part of, you know, like a thing in my life where a part of my soul just left, you know, and was like, I'm out. I'm never doing that again. And I just made it up as I went along. I asked to locate that part of myself. I asked to like see myself at that age in that moment. I asked her to, you know, like we talked a little while, I cut her a deal, and I asked her to come back into my energy field, right? Now, as the story, and then I remember writing down in my notebook, like just flipping the switch. And I was like, you know, like I just wrote, it was almost like a fictional story or a poem, but I wrote something about like just love, oh, I loved the stage and I love performing now on the stage, you know, like just making it up, you know, like you just making it up as I go on. Anyways, it was like probably a month or a couple months later, I not only moved to a place where I had years and years before that seen a mountain lion, but one of the first people I met was this woman my age who she was like, I really want to write a play. And I was like, oh, okay. And I had actually been having other dreams about the theater that I couldn't like figure them out either, because I'm not like into theater. And I was like, okay, I'll help you with that, like only as an elaborate action plan. I was like, I just did this soul retrieval. I've been having dreams. Then after that soul retrieval, I was having dreams about the theater. And now this person comes up to me and says that she wants help writing a play. And I said, okay, you know,
That's
and
epic.
you know, like since that point, we wrote a play. It was performed. We ended up making money on it, performing it on a real stage in our town. And through that process, I made like somebody who's become like my closest friend in this new town. So it's like, you see, it's hard sometimes in the moment. We do things, we re-enter a dream, and you're like, well, was that all in my imagination? Maybe, maybe not, you know?
Yeah.
When you play it out and just give it a little, and like just do it without expectation or without needing something back right away, and just do it because it's interesting and it's fun and it's exciting and it is nourishing, you know, then you see how things play out. For me, it's definitely, you know, like it played out pretty clearly. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
That's beautiful. It feels very healing to have a play. I mean, not only like support this play and have it do well. I feel like there's a full circle moment there with that experience.
Exactly.
Wait, were you in the play?
No, I helped write it.
Okay.
I did not perform in
That's
the
cool because now you're in the director's role. You're like, okay, I'm creating it now, not just
yeah.
the victim of its criticism. A short example that I just thought of that I recently did. So, because there's aspects of dreams like that where it sticks with you and you almost have to do something about it.
Right.
Where it stays with you all day. And I did have a dream where I was making a drink and it had rose hips in it. And I distinctly remember rose hips being the main ingredient. And I can't remember the details of the dream now, but I later that day needed to get oil for my face, and I picked one that the first ingredient was rose hips. And ever since, I loved it. Like it nourished my skin better than any other oil that I've ever used. And so now, like, that's the first ingredient I want in my oils is rose hips. But I never thought of it before or even knew what it was for. So
Right.
that was
there
a
you
fun
go.
dream helping me out there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really an interesting thing that we get to, you know, there's been phases of our humanity where we understood dreaming very well, like what I was, you know, specifically in our oldest form, in our most archaic records, we seem to understand dreaming better than anything. There was less of a differentiation between the dreaming and the waking world, you know. Now it's like almost like those worlds have separated so much. We don't understand what it is almost at all anymore. I mean, it's like probably one of the most unexplored and unknown subjects there is, especially for it being so universal. It's something that is part of our human experience that we all have. It's part of being alive, like, and yet we know nothing about it really, and we don't talk about it even. you know?
In
So
the
it's so
first
interesting, and it's like something we get to, but it's, like you can lament the fact that we've like lost the wisdom, or we can get excited about the fact that we get to like re-pioneer something, you know? Like what else hasn't been explored? We really like, I don't, well, you could say that we've really figured out a lot about like the world and our experience. I mean, personally, I think that most of what we think is right is wrong, but dreaming is something still just like, it's still like just sitting there waiting to be reopened, like opened back up, rediscovered. And it's like, you know,
in the first episode that we did together, you mentioned this as well. Just with the nature of dreams not really being explored, and that there is a lot to learn and a lot to grow, and that we can see it as a, like what you just said, something we can play with and have fun with rediscovering. And I think connecting it is the fact that we don't honor it, or that we haven't honored it, so that it has become weaker in its impact and its value in our daily lives. It makes me think of American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I don't know if you've read it. I've only read it. I haven't watched the TV series that they made of it. But the concept is that these gods are worshipped, and so they have strength. But the gods who have been forgotten are losing their strength. That reminds
exactly.
me of our relationship with dreams.
Yeah, perfect parallel.
Well, returning back to the dream, unless you had something else you want to add on to that about
Let's
dreams.
return back to the dream. Yeah.
Okay. I love when we expand into the philosophy of it all, because I think it really is just a wider projection of what the dream is bringing us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fun returning or going there and letting it. And so returning back to the dream, was there, first of all, more notes that you had on any aspects of the dreams you wanted to address? Anything for the dreamer?
I said here, I'll sum it up with a note that I took. I see this dream as a full circle of coming together and resolving of unconscious and conscious, forgotten and remembered, conflict and order, scarcity and nourishment. This dream to me seems to revolve around themes of gathering resources, seeking guidance, facing pressure and fear, transitioning between roles or situations in life, and resources for nourishment that were kept away in the past or stored away in the past in the unconscious, and are now ready to reemerge in the right moment to help me in my life. I said that if it were my dream, if I ever need help remembering what truly nourishes me, not only my soul, but my material life as well, I would ask the elephant. I would become the elephant and use her ability to remember the most distinctive details and the long, arduous, but fulfilling path and journey and migration of life. Within her, I remember all I need to know to nourish myself and create balance and harmony. I am guided, and I am also a guide to others. So like I said, like in terms of power animals and using the vital energy of other life forms available to us, if this were my dream, if anything, I would at least do something to honor the elephant, anything, like at the very minimal, get a little elephant thing, a little like figurine at a store, draw a picture, write a poem, make a dance, do something, anything, at the very least. And that could be all you really, one would really have to do something to honor that energy in my life.
When you said little figures, I thought of Ganesha. That's a really common elephant figure you would see. And Ganesha is known to remove obstacles in our lives too. So
there you go. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Something to remember the dream, something to keep bringing its energy, like into the world, like you just said about American Gods. Like you remember the dream remembers you, is available to help you, not only once, but continuously. over and over again.
Yeah, or an elephant story.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything, anything that calls to the dreamer.
Yeah. There was one thing that I thought of from a personal experience that kept coming up for me with my association to elephants is in high school when I all about animal and environmental activism, just like that awakening and passion that I had as a teenager with all that. In my art class, I chose to do a piece that was about that it was of an elephant, and it was a diptych. So there's a piece on each side, and they had to be related to each other, but contrasting at the same time. So I chose to do, and it's an ink print where you like carve and then stamp it. And it was an elephant on one side, and on the other side was a bull hook, which is what they use to train elephants in circuses. And it's like it's obviously an abusive instrument, but it was my way of kind of like, this is what we're doing to elephants, you know. Yeah, as my little activist like fire. But and the elephant looked really sad, but it made me think of this a little bit because in a way there's this sense of the elephant being helpless, and there's this emotional nature to it, but then there's also the control and the power. It kind of reflects of the captors in the dream. So I just wanted to share that story because that's what came up for me in my life with the elephant. Yeah.
Totally. I love that. I mean, that ties to me, it ties all the way back around to like the soul loss and soul retrieval, trying to train parts of ourselves that are, wild, that have their own, unique, beautiful elements, and trying to like train them to fit into other places. And like the soul is like, peace. And then regathering them back out, the activism, the going forth and freeing, regathering, re-honoring, re-liberating parts of our soul.
Yeah, this feels like a very healing theme overall. Like I'm excited. You've sent your response to the dreamer before?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
yeah.
a lot of it, I mean, I didn't write that entire thing. It was a little different. It was kind of a while ago, and some things changed. I think our conversation now is more relevant. And the theme will come back up a lot, like soul loss, the soul going away, also parts of ourselves being stuck in time and replaying events on loop and having that inform our current trajectory, and then getting confused as why things aren't working out, or why we keep repeating habits and repeating patterns, or meeting the same person over and over again,
Yeah. That's
This
something
will happen a lot.
Yeah.
This is like a lot of dream. I think almost 70, I would say. Might completely change my mind on this, but in this moment, I feel like at least 70% of dreams are portals into, or showing us parts of ourselves that are gone from our energy field, needing to be retrieved, or stuck in time somewhere on repeat, informing our lives in a way that's not helpful.
I think repeating dreams is something from my experience, I feel everyone has repeating dreams, at least like one prominent one. Even if they don't have vivid dreams often, I find that anytime I speak to someone about dreams, they have that one repeating dream that keeps coming back. And I actually spoke to someone recently that gave me a really, really beautiful perspective, because often, like at least for me, my repeating dream was when I was a kid. And I was like 4 years old in the dream, and I'm in a car, driving the car, and I'm about to crash it. And he said to me, well, what's the one thing that a child is most afraid of? He said, to be responsible, because as a kid, you're not ready to take on responsibility, to be in the driver's seat. And for a lot of us, I would say, and most of our parents, we might not have had, the environment or parents where we felt like we could be free from not feeling responsible in some way. Maybe we had to take care of something in our environment, our siblings, or even our parents. So it was really powerful to hear that, because that even though it's so small, and what he said there just opened up so many other things in my life that keeps repeating this fear of responsibility or taking on responsibility or feeling like I'm not responsible enough. Like that was just such a major overarching theme that unlocked from this one dream.
Perfect example.
Yeah, so this is fun, powerful theme to work with, I would say.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking of a list of missions that I would love to
Yeah,
honor.
what would be your action plans if this were your dream?
This was my dream. I'm feeling clay is a big one. I want to like play with mud, like, stick my hands in some mud or sculpt something, even sculpt something out of clay, and or return to the court. I love playing tennis, and that's something I would love to return to. So
I love that. I would, yeah, both of those things. Clay is actually, yeah, it's, I mean, maybe not if you live in like a super dense city, but even if you do, clay is an abundant resource, you know? It's such an abundant thing to go out and you can just get a ball of, even if it's not clay, you get a ball of dirt and make clay, you know? Make a ball, make an elephant, do something.
What about for
And
you?
then,
What did you think of?
if this were my dream, other than doing something about the elephant specifically, well, okay, well, if this were my dream, I would definitely re-enter the dream and get some clarity. Other than that, though, I would do something specifically to honor the elephant, whether that's drawing a picture or buying a little thingy, or writing a poem. Maybe I would write an I am poem from the perspective of the elephant to like really put on paper and solidify all of the skills and abilities and attributes I have as that creature, and then be able to refer to that in times of where I'm feeling very restricted and limited, as a way to like, it's like a, yeah, it's like a little memory palace of expanding consciousness to that thing, to this experience I've had, you know, and being able to recall and reutilize that experience whenever I need to. So I like I am poems. It's it's inspired by an old Celtic style poem called the Song of, shit. It starts with an A and I'm not totally sure how to pronounce it because Gaelic is extraordinarily archaic and complex and not phonetic. But it's like this extraordinarily beautiful I am poem. It's in the book The White Goddess by Robert Graves. This is the book that it is highlighted in, and the reason it is like known in the contemporary literary world probably at all. But it's an I am poem, and it's like each line starts with I am, but it's not I am. They're not from like the human experience. They're like I am a stag of 7 tines. I am the tomb of your last hope. I am the wind on a lake. You know, like it's all very, they're different, you know, like they're aspects of reality that aren't from the human mind. So I'm really, from that poem, I was inspired. I was like, oh, you could do this with your dreams, you know? You can do this with your dream, the character you play in dreams, or the characters that are just within the dream itself, including aspects of the dream that, you know, the environment, the mountain, the fork on the table, you know, all taking in all aspects of the dream as myself. You know, a fun thing I like to do now with dreams is write I am poems or I am statements based on the dream. So for this dream, this is a perfect dream to do that with, because I was literally from the perspective of another creature. So I would write, if it were my dream specifically, I would write an I am poem from the perspective of an elephant. And then I would also do something in my life that gives me vital energy to honor the theme of reintegrating vital energy into my life, which I think was, if this were my dream, that is like the most major theme of this whole dream, is that. So I would do something that is along those lines for me, whether that's playing netball, if that, you know, or drawing pictures, making paintings, going out in nature, any activity, any actual material direct activity I doing in the material world that that like invigorates vital energy in my life.
What is that book called again? White Book by Robert Graves.
The White Goddess.
The White Goddess. White Goddess. I have to add these book recommendations to the description.
This book is it's yeah, it's definitely worth having on the shelf for sure. And there's like really beautiful resources. It is dense. I have not made it very far at all. Extraordinarily dense, but very worthwhile. Extremely worthwhile. Yeah.
Great.
It's just a warning.
It sounds really cool from what you described.
Oh yeah, it's like the way my friend who introduced me described it. It's like archaic bardic rap battles, but they're talking about like poetic warfare, like doing like actually having like combat and battle, but in the form of like poetry, in like old Celtic bardic poetry, and like but in the sense of how in the older world using poetry wasn't just like rhyming a nice thing together, creating like metaphors or even being artful. It was a literal technology of how to put sound and rhythm and tone together in order to influence the material world.
I love that description.
So a lot of you'll hear people talk about like, oh, they use like sound harmonics to like build the pyramid to like, but kind of true. It's being able to use sound harmonics to influence the material world in a physical way immediately. Like, so to be able to like have this. There's a poem by oh my God, how am I forgetting his name right now? Is he Argentinian? Here, let me
Sure.
Yes. Borges. Jorge Luis Borges. Okay. So
I've read one of his books. Yeah.
One of the books I've read is called Dream Tigers, appropriately enough. And it's a series of very short stories. One of the stories that is like cryptic, unless like you have this in mind, is where a poet meets a king, and the king invites the poet over to his palace, and the king shows all the poet like all of the like all of the features, the staircases, the courtyards, the gardens, the ceilings, the molding, the statues, like all of the like grandiose like material, that's like endless and incredible and should, render anyone and everyone amazed and shocked and humbled, right? And he shows this to the poet, and the poet isn't very impressed. And then in the there's just one line where the poet, they're like, we don't know totally what happened, but basically what we think happened, that after like the king showed the poet all of the wonders and extravagant he had, in a single word, the poet made them all disappear. And so you could take that symbolically, but I think it's quite literal, like as a literal reference to the way that like actually there's, like there wasn't poetry, what used to be an ancient technology that could influence the material world. And I was like in that, because I'd known that concept, but never seen an example. And then I read that little story and I was like, there it is.
Well, I see, hearing that too, my interpretation would be that with one word, he made all of that meaningless. He said something to just make it completely meaningless, which in a way connects to what you said, does make it lose its value, which then it's not really there anymore. But Yeah. It doesn't hold
Totally.
weight. It doesn't hold
Yeah.
weight. Like, yeah. Well, it connects so much to like sound affecting water, which is something people talk about all the time nowadays, like Dr. Emoto's work. And the fact that you can program our subconscious with like words and hypnotism. So it is shown, but we don't see it in this format, which I think is really cool. I love poetry. So
Yeah, a little
check it out.
tangent there, but that's okay. It'll
That's great.
probably come up again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fun exploring the different themes. So.